This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Hi, and welcome to the second show of our fourth season of our podcast. And we're going to hearken back to a show I did as a bonus show last July and continue with the theme of comedy and how it's healthy. So what I found is a TV show that I and comic Joel Hodgson were on back in the early 80s. It was called Look Who's Talking, a TV show on a local NBC affiliate. The hosts were Jim Finnerty and Sue Pearson. But what makes this fun is that the comic was Joel Hodgson. He makes an appearance on the show, does a couple bits where he sticks a woodpecker to his head and pretends he's a tree. Joel was a prop comic. You know, he goes to blow up a bubble, but never actually blows it up. And it kind of throws people off. And right in the beginning, he has a jack in the box, but when it goes off, instead of jumping up, everything falls out the bottom. So Joel Hodgson, if you didn't know, was a really funny and talented prop comic and toy designer back in the early 80s. He went on, after working for me a couple of years, to getting a job with the Mattel Toy Corporation. And after a short time with that, he went on to start and star in Mystery Science Theater 3000. If you don't remember that, it came out in 1988. Starred Joel Hodgson with a couple robots, and they did really funny voiceover and chatting about bad horror and space-themed movies. Mystery Science Theater 3000 was a huge hit and still can be found today. In fact, in 2017, Netflix decided to put money behind it and ran for another 2 seasons on their channel. So Mystery Science Theater 3000, very successful series of TV shows starring the very unique and funny Joel Hodgson. And if you get a chance, you'll also hear great information from Dr. David Rudd as he explains how comedy is healthy for you. And you'll even hear me on the interview talking about comedy and my new club, Laughs Unlimited. And it goes beyond that. There's even included in the interview improv manager Scott Coleman, who talks about the improv group RSVP. They actually do a little segment in the middle of the show. You'll hear that. But it's great because Look Who's Talking was one of those local magazine shows. So they had encouraged people to call in and ask questions. And they went to the audience to ask questions. And it's all about stand-up comedy and how healthy it is for you. So sit back and enjoy this half-hour show starring Joel Hodgson and Dr. David Rudd and myself as we talk about stand-up comedy and how healthy it is. Enjoy.
Laughter is the best medicine. Laughter can make you feel better psychologically, physically. Laughter is something that we all do and really never think about it. Joel Hodgson, however, thinks about laughter all the time.
Watch this. I'd like to start off by doing an impression for you all, all right? I'm a tree. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm here at the Laughs Unlimited this week here in town, and I just moved out here to California, and these are some pictures of my trip. And I'd like to start them right over here, okay? Oh, here's something. It's my impression of a canary. I'm just kidding, really, it's an impression of a canary on a rocket sled. Hey, look. They finally found Fred Flintstone's tie. This is an invention of mine. I wear this to ball games, and like no matter where I have to sit, it feels like I'm right behind home plate. This is an invention of mine. It's the Joel Hodgson Pocket Mohawk.
Mr. T couldn't have done it better. We're going to talk about laughter in your health this morning and talk to you on Look Who's Talking.
Live from the KCRA studios in Sacramento. Today on Look Who's Talking, laughter, the best medicine, an examination of how humor can prevent tension and anxiety. And in the Consultant's Corner, clairvoyant astrologer Sherry Bowling with your latest forecast on Look Who's Talking. Now, Jim Finnerty and Sue Pearson.
Good morning and welcome to Look Who's Talking. I'm Jim Finnerty.
I'm Sue Pearson.
Laughter can be good for your health. Norman Cousins wrote the book, Laughter is the Best Medicine, but what can it do for you? I think you're going to be surprised with some of the things you find out this morning. And how do we respond to laughter? Different types of comedy and different types of comedians. We're going to talk about all of that, and we're going to talk with you.
What you laugh at may determine what your personality is, too. We want to hear from you. Just call us at 443-TALK, and if you're out of the area, Fiddletown, Placerville, San Jose, anywhere, just call us collect.
We've got a number of guests joining us this morning. I'd like to introduce the first three. First of all, Scott Edwards is the owner and operator of Laughs Unlimited, a professional club for comedians and entertainers located in Old Sacramento. You've been with us before. Nice to see you again. Next to him, Joel Hodgson, you've seen already, a comic currently heading up the bill at Laughs Unlimited and also appearing regularly on Saturday Night Live and soon to appear regularly on the David Letterman Show right here on NBC, as Ed Sullivan might say. And Dan Rudd, next to him, is a licensed marriage, family, and child therapist who says that laughter has some definite psychological and emotional benefits when it comes to your health. Scott, let me start with you first, because you say a lot of people come into the club to escape reality. And when they're escaping reality, what does that do to them psychologically?
Well, it has to have a relaxing effect. One of the nice parts about being in the comedy business is that people have a hard day at work. They got to pay their bills. They got cars breaking down, all the things that we all live with day to day. And the 2 hours that they spend at Laughs Unlimited, you just don't have time to think of it because you're being entertained. It's live, it's spontaneous, you're involved, and because it's comedy-oriented, everything's in an up, relaxing, up type mood.
Joel, are men and women different as audience? Do you see different reactions?
I think what I've found out is that there is a difference in the way women and men react. However, if a comic's good and he's broad enough for both men and women, everybody has a good time.
What are some of the differences you see?
I think a lot of times I think people are all interested in different things. And so men are interested in different things. If a comedian does all sports humor and women aren't necessarily into that, I'm not saying it's not true, but if a man does just sports humor, or if a woman just does cooking jokes, there are women comedians too, Men, of course, the sexes are crossing over now, but people can alienate each other, and so, by talking about specific things.
Joel, you're wearing your overcoat on set. How come?
I forgot my sport coat.
Oh, okay. Well, let me ask Roy. What does laughter make you feel better?
Oh, of course.
Do you notice a physical difference when you're having a good time?
Oh, I think so, yes.
What happens?
I just feel good.
I just feel good. Dan, he says something that doctors, and I want to quote something from William Fry, a Stanford University psychiatrist, who said, heart and blood circulation rates soar, and imitating the effects of an aerobic workout, muscles vibrate, providing an internal massage that breaks up tension. I guess it's the inside motion there. And the brain emits something called hormones, endorphins. Endorphins do what?
Basically, endorphins make us feel good. Laughing is like internal jogging. It's a lot easier than going out jogging, but you get some of the same benefits. Endorphins are a chemical substance that make us feel better. It actually emotionally feel better. It numbs pain. That's what happens when we laugh. as well as the aerobic benefits.
Psychologically, what's happening within our body when we laugh? Emotionally, how are we reacting, and how does that make us physically feel better?
Emotionally, what's happening, as Scott was saying, when we're laughing, we're enjoying ourselves right now in the moment. A lot of the times we go around worrying about things and our concerns and worry, and we don't feel good. Often the worry is not productive. It doesn't do any good. When we're laughing, we're enjoying our life right now. And of course, right now is all you ever have.
You know, there's also some evidence from another study that suggests doctors can tell how seriously ill a patient is if the patient doesn't respond to comedy.
A sign of health is the ability to laugh, to experience pleasure as well as pain. You would think people would really be into pleasure because it feels good, but a lot of people are more addicted to pain than they are pleasure. A friend of mine who has a habit of depression, her daughter once said to her, you know, Mom, you're a depression junkie. And actually, a lot of people are more attached to feeling crummy because they're used to it. It's comfortable because they do it all the time.
A depression junkie. Well, let's hope we've got some humor junkies. We're going to take a break right here. Come back and do some more humor of a little different sort. Humor spells control to some people, and we'll talk with you at 443 Talk about humor and what makes you feel good. Lots more to come. Be right back. Good morning and welcome back to Look Who's Talking. We're talking about comedy and your health this morning. I hardly ever get to work with a mic stand. I feel like a stand-up comedian this morning. We've got some people from RSVP, an improvisational comedy troupe now appearing at Delta Queen, also here in Old Sacramento. And we have with us John Van Hoof, Sigrid Nilsson, and Kathy Little.
Good morning. Before we launch into an improvisation, I'd like to explain that what we do in our show is made up on the spot, and the audience actually participates by giving suggestions for the subjects that we deal with. So what I'd like to do is get a subject that we could deal with in an interview situation, since we can't really jump up and down and hang on the rafters here. So a subject from anyone in the audience, just call it out.
Income tax.
Income tax? That's fine. Good morning and welcome to Look Tucking Who's. I'm your host, Haphazard.
And I'm Sarah Bellum.
And today we have a tremendous guest, all the way from Ukraine, Hershna Gurna. Let's welcome her to the show. Hershna?
Come on in here, Hershna. Come on, it's all right, just come on.
She's written a book, Income Tax and How to Hide Them. And one thing we should mention, from Ukraine, Hershna has not a chance to have learned English. However, she does travel around with a whistle, and you may hear that now and then, and that cues her when to speak. However, we do have a translator with us. We've both learned some Ukrainian this week, and so we're going to ask her about the history of income tax. What was the first income tax?
It seems that when the first caveman had a rock, somebody else wanted it.
That would seem the truth. I wanted to ask the producer, where's my cord?
That's Mr. Microphone.
Also, have a couple of questions ready about income tax. When I ask her now about income tax today in the United States, she has studied this for at least 10 minutes. La flicka, la punteada.
This is speeder, full speeder, and this cannot quiz another state, of course, father, who is not a hero.
She said Ed Meese has revolutionized income tax in the United States.
She's come all the way from Ukraine to be here today, so...
Well, we could ask her about the future of income tax. What do you say?
Okay.
Then we'll close it out.
All right.
That person's jumping up and down now.
Hershna, vi höger sig för en dagfika. Finns stora fiskar för nästan från det fri.
This next, this in the dose, but I had to do the poon, so that I was a girl, but good is not a question of time, and she had to put stand a cook's manner.
That's a tough one.
Yes. If I can translate this properly, it seems that the government will be taking more and more of your money until you have none at all, and then you can just show up on the doorstep and say, hey, feed me, huh?
Thank you for watching Look Talking Who's. Next week we'll be seeing the leading show connect Lord New England.
All right, I want to, John Van Hoof, Sigrid Nilsson, and Kathy Little. And also with us is Scott Coleman, who's a member of RSVP. Improvisational comedy.
differs in that obviously you're working with an audience in this case. How does that humor differ from a stand-up comedy?
Well, the audience is more important to us because
they are to Joel if they don't laugh.
But without the audience, we don't have a show. Plus, it's more real. It's more like life because it comes straight from the audience. We ask them what they want to talk about, and we talk about it.
I want to come back to comedians feeling good.
This is him. This is you.
This is
Mr. Potato Head?
Potato Head. Let's take a call from one of our viewers at home. Line 1, good morning, you're with us.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
I would like to know, has anyone actually ever died laughing?
Has anyone ever died laughing?
What a way to go.
Yes.
I don't know. Has anybody ever died laughing?
So funny.
You've had a...
I just don't.
We've been real fortunate over at Laughs Unlimited. We haven't had anybody fall over yet. We've had a few people that... we have a lot of pregnant women come in. I think the laughter tends to rejuvenate the baby inside, and we've had a few women leaving, kind of holding and saying, hospital, hospital, but we've had nobody keel over yet.
Born laughing.
There's been no research showing that laughing is hazardous to your health. Actually, the book you were mentioning by Norman Cousins is a man who had cancer and decided to do his own laugh therapy, and laughed himself out of his cancer. He watched Laurel and Hardy movies over a period of months. Now, the doctors, of course, aren't laughing at this. They don't think it's funny that people can cure themselves, but...
they just haven't found a way to bill for that.
We have a question up here, Michael.
Right, I have two questions, really. One question, what prompts a comedian to become a comedian? And the second one, how long does it take to develop a routine?
Okay, let me throw in a third on that. Let me ask Joel, first of all, and that is, in terms of you feeling better, don't bite, you feeling better when you're on stage. What does laughter do for you?
Okay, I'll tell you, first of all, it'll be 3 years for me in May that I've been doing it and performing, and the reason I got into it, I guess I've always been interested in communicating and telling people my ideas, and this is just how I do it with my props and my ideas.
Had you always, were you the class cut up when you were little?
I guess so, in a different way, I suppose, but I've always been interested in three-dimensional props, and I just like that kind of... I've always had toys around and stuff.
What does it make you feel like when you're on stage?
Well, the biggest thing for me is just the idea that people can understand and relate and identify with something I've made. So the idea that they're laughing, I look at that as like it's recognition. They're saying, hey, I understand what you're doing, and I like what you're doing.
What about, Scott, what about the idea of laughter as control?
It's interesting. I've been doing it for 2 years, and my life has changed considerably during that 2 years. But the only thing that hasn't changed is the fact that I'm still doing comedy. I've lived in 11 places. I spent 6 months in the Army for National Guard training, and so the only thing that was really constant, even when I was in the Army, I was still doing comedy. So the only actual control I have over my life is comedy. Even when things are going wrong all around me, my life maintains the comedy.
How do you put a routine together? Let's get to question number 2.
Okay. Well, for us, it's pretty easy because it's improvised from the audience, and you put it together on stage. I have done some stand-up, and all you do is you, when I'm working, I have another job, I work in a gas station, and when I'm working there, I come up with things out of the spur of the moment, and all I do is I say, oh, that's funny. And then you try to make it funny again on stage, which is the hard part for me, because when I'm on stage doing something I've rehearsed, it's lost its spontaneity for me.
Gas can be funny. Let me take a quick call from one of our viewers at home. Line 2. Go ahead, you're with us.
Hi, am I on the line?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I had a question for Dan Rudd, excuse me.
Right.
No joke there, no. It's that when I was growing up, we were always poking fun at each other. And we always had a good time and stuff, you know, and now I'm married, have a family and everything, and every once in a while I kind of poke fun at my husband, and he kind of gets upset, you know, like I make fun of, you know, he's going to wrinkle, oh, you're always looking at wrinkles in your clothes, don't worry about it. And I was just wondering, you know, to me, like, laughing is a release of tension, and poking fun at somebody is kind of like telling somebody a nice way how things bug you, you know, and I was just wondering, am I wrong at poking fun at him and him getting upset? Or
He obviously doesn't have your sense of humor. That's
right. I was telling him to lighten up and things like that.
Dan,
and,
what about that? What about the reactions you get in terms of what's funny to you?
Well, I don't want to get into the right or wrong in terms of if she's right or he's wrong about it, because that's a no-win tunnel. A lot of times people have a hard time laughing at themselves, and there's a real ability to be able to do that and not take yourself so seriously. One of the things that couples need to look at is, are you expressing something that you really need to express directly through humor? Sometimes humor can be, sarcasm can be criticism or things that you're really not saying directly. Once you have the decks cleared and work out the important stuff, then it frees you up to be able to laugh at the things that we have in common. It's like Joel and I were talking about, humor really creates a bond between people, because there's certain things we're all in this together. We all get wrinkles, we all grow old.
Yeah, but this doesn't sound like a bond, Dan. This sounds like something that she finds funny and thinks, she says, I grew up with humor and it worked for me, but he's not reacting in the same way. Can this be negative?
Well, you have Don Rickles as the king of that. I mean, poking fun at people's differences and problems and personalities and looks and everything. And he's made a whole life of it.
Speaking of that, there's some evidence that if you are fond of satire, if you are fond of nonsense jokes, it may mean something very important about your personality. We're going to talk about that and more. We'll be right back.
A new group springing up across the United States, Nurses for Laughter, 300-member organization. Nurses who say laughter in the hospital helps patients feel better. In a survey they took, 39 out of 40 of their patients says they'd rather have a funny nurse than a serious nurse, and so it's a legit organization. We're talking with you, 443-TALK. Line 4, good morning.
Yes, I'm really interested in the things that you've said about laughter being good medicine, and being a recovering alcoholic, I found that after having gone through the painful process of making amends for all the trouble that I'd caused through my addiction, that learning to laugh at myself and some of the things that I've done was a good way of getting rid of the guilt and the pain. And
what did it do for you? How did it
recovery?
How did it make you feel?
The laughter?
Yes.
Well, it made me take myself less serious and help do away with the fact that maybe I was really a bad guy.
Maybe you're really, John, you're nodding your head. Let me get you to stand. Can you identify with that? Not that you're a recovering alcoholic.
I could be one day if I stay in comedy. Now, the thing that we do improvisationally, which is the only thing I can relate to, because I've only done stand-up comedy once, and that was enough for me, that people, when they have trouble, they usually look at themselves too seriously. And the best comedy is the most universal. And if you can put yourself out and say, I did this stupid thing. We ask people in classes when we give seminars, come up and tell us the stupidest thing you've ever done. And there's a big release there, because everyone in the room has done something incredibly stupid. And so that universality of comedy, of looking at yourself, you have that kind of a problem, and laughing at it and saying, God, I am fallible. And it's the infallible people who usually are the people who don't laugh.
And Joel's doing his Mr. Potato Head in the background.
I have something to say. No, seriously, comedy, a lot of it is, and being able to laugh is the idea of embracing or understanding who you are and admitting, like the man who called said, your problems, and admitting what's wrong with you. And a lot of times a comedian, if he's going to be successful, has to embrace what's funny about him, which isn't always easy. You know, I talk slow and I'm kind of hangdoggy looking, you know, and I have to understand that to be funny, and so that works both ways for the comedian and the audience.
You know, according to a group of psychologists, who you are has a lot to do with what you like to laugh at. A team of Los Angeles psychologists next year will be publishing, as part of a book, the first test that attempts to measure your sense of humor, and they found the most self-assured and confident people love nonsense jokes. Philosophical jokes and social satire appeal to people more educated, well-educated, liberal people. And finally, well-educated, tough-minded young women are particularly fond of jokes that are hostile to men. Part of our new
there's a lot of that
today.
going around.
Margaret, can I get you to stand up? You had a question.
Yes, how do you deal with someone whose total humor is sarcastic, usually directed at you?
Sarcasm can sometimes be tough to handle.
There's one thing that you find that, in fact, this is what's really, I find the toughest side. In fact, one of the reasons that I would never go into stand-up comedy myself, it's bad enough being an MC, that when you're on stage, you have to deal with everybody, and the sarcasm, everybody likes something different. Okay, Don Rickles, as I mentioned before, you're talking about sarcasm jokes. That's a lot of his repertoire. And a lot of people can laugh at themselves and know it's a joke and can take it. A lot of people can't.
Well, let me ask Dan, though. Sometimes when sarcasm is directed to you over and over again, and the person says, well, it's just a joke, could there be an element of truth in it that makes you feel bad because you know it might be?
Yeah, it's a good point, Margaret, that you brought up about sarcasm, because it can be biting and wounding, and when you're communicating with your partner, your family, your friends in that way, they can easily take it the wrong way. And many times there is a message in that needs to be communicated directly, like I'm upset about your weight, or I'm upset about this, or I'm upset about that. The lady that made the first phone call, in terms of, she said her husband couldn't take the joking, what I would suggest to people is to laugh about yourself first, and that's a way to share humor with your partner or your friend.
But we often hear people who laugh about themselves. They say, you laugh about yourself. That's because you really don't have a good self-image of yourself, and so you're putting yourself down.
Actually, that's not, research doesn't show that. The people that are more self-confident are better able to, it's called the observing ego in psychology, but it's to step outside of yourself and look at yourself. We all are dealing with the same things in life, and we all make mistakes, and it's like the man that called about the recovering alcoholic, to be able to laugh at that instead of beat yourself up about it. He put in the correction, as in starting drinking, and then he was able to laugh instead of keep criticizing himself.
Then what kind of person are you if you're continually putting other people down with it's only a joke as you're...
It's usually not just a joke. You need to look and see, well, what is the hidden message in there?
There's some truth in all of it. I mean, there has to be some basis, or there's no relationship.
Let me get
which is what causes
comment from Kat.
Okay, well, like what Margaret was saying was that somebody who continually does that, right? Well, don't you think that they have a problem also? I mean, especially if they keep poking at the same poke. And you can be really confident, and you can laugh at it, and ha ha ha, yeah, that's me, right? Ha ha ha, yep, that's me, right? And after a while, it gets really stupid. Don't you think you could just not laugh anymore?
Oh, sure. You need to sit down with that person and say, that's not funny. That's off limits for me. I'm not to the point where I'm comfortable being teased about the rolls on my belt. So you have to talk about
talk about my shoes or something, right?
Shoes. I like shoes.
I've been meaning to talk to you about your shoes.
We've got another caller on the line. Line 3. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to know if it's better to laugh alone or laugh together. Because when I'm in friends, they might think stuff isn't funny, and I might. And I might feel embarrassed or...
That's a great question, because one of the things about having a sense of humor or laughing at other people's sense of humor is people are so afraid to look foolish and to risk and put themselves out there, and we wreck so much of our own enjoyment of life. So I would say, if something's funny, for heaven's sakes, feel free to laugh at it.
It goes back to what you were saying before. What you laugh at says a lot about yourself. And a lot of people don't want to laugh at something because it might be exposing a certain part of themselves, and they don't know if everyone else is going to agree with that, or if it's conflicting.
Something I've noticed is that small audiences will laugh less than a large audience, because there's a certain amount of uncomfortableness with laughing when nobody else is.
It's sort of a mob mentality. In other words, you become a little more anonymous. A little more anonymous simply because you're not so identifiable.
It's okay to laugh if you're with a bunch of people laughing, because nobody's going to notice you're laughing.
Let me come back to the question that the caller had, which is laughing by yourself versus laughing in a crowd. There has to be benefits, Dan, I would imagine, in both situations. Norman Cousins talked about it in a one-to-one basis, looking at the world through laughter himself.
Well, again, I think that there's a lot of benefit to both. To be when you're driving along and you think about something and you just chuckle, that's a moment to enjoy. I think it's harder for people to laugh in a group because of the thing about, well, what if I laugh and the whole rest of the room is serious? Does that mean I'm dumb, or I'm out to lunch? A lot of times, if you stop and think about the last time you got a case of the giggles. I can remember when I was a little kid, it was like Easter Sunday, and it was the service was outside, and you're supposed to be serious and spiritual. There were all these birds overhead pooping on the congregation, and it just struck me real funny, and I giggled.
I can understand that.
The rest
it says a lot about you, Dan.
Tell me, what's happening? Because once in my career has it happened, and I know, Jim, it's probably happened to you, it's happened to all of us. Something funny happens during a commercial break, and I was doing the news at the time, and you get a case of the giggles so badly that you cannot read the next story.
Stop.
And your co-anchor sees you laughing, and it's infectious. He can't do the story either, and you wind up having to take another commercial break. Now, the original thing that's funny isn't even funny anymore. You're just laughing because somebody else is laughing.
It is contagious, and we have a rather large room. We see 200 people, and we find that if the more people... I actually disagree with you, because you were saying this, people might feel self-conscious laughing in a group because what other people might see. That's true if you've got 5 or 10 people and everybody can see every single other person. In a large group, 50, 100, 200 people, you become anonymous because you're just one of the group, and there's a certain energy that is built up by the group, and even if you don't think it's as funny as the guy next to you, you're going to laugh and get into it because everybody else is.
It's okay.
You want to be part of the group.
And movies are funnier if it's a full house. You know, every time if you go to a movie and there's nobody there, it's not as good, but if everybody's there, you have a great time.
It's like reading the
Helen's got a
comics.
question here.
You know, the comics are funny to you, but...
I often, when I'm reading the comics or see a cartoon in the newspaper, I laugh out loud when I'm all by myself, and I've had people tell me that's really weird.
How do you feel about it, though? How does it make you feel?
Well, I think they're weird.
That's right.
What do you think, Helen, of laugh tracks on TV programs?
Oh, I don't like them. I like it to be real.
I think we've got
real
consensus
laughter.
here.
Listen, we're going to continue talking about some real laughter. Talk some more with you at 443 Talk. Lots more laughs to come. Stay with us. We'll be right back in just a moment. Back to Look Who's Talking. We're talking about laughter this morning. Melanie, can I get you to stand just a moment? You had a question.
Well, I find that laughter is very important. I work in an emergency room, and not only is it important to the patients to joke and laugh with them in a moment of crisis, but it is important amongst the personnel to keep us going.
What about the idea that laughter physically can be good for your health? The idea that Norman Cousins is talking about.
I believe that too. And I don't know exactly why. I think it would make you feel more relaxed, and then if you're cheerful too, that would help.
That's good. Thank you.
You know, we've talked about different kinds of humor, and we've mentioned laugh tracks and got a consensus here that nobody likes it at all. John, you're talking about a different kind of humor.
Well, yes, I've been wondering whether the practical joke or the practical jokester is a plus for humor or is a negative.
Well, let me ask you first of all, because I know you told me you're a practical joker. What's the best one you ever pulled off?
I think the best one was when we were riding in the carpool one day coming home from work. I have a kind of a blood pressure problem, and I had my own sphygmometer. And the guys were kind of interested in how it was going. There's 6 of us in this old Plymouth driving down the road, you know. And George was driving. He says, "John, would you check my blood pressure?" So he's driving, and I put the cuff on him, you know, and I pump it up, and you should have seen the people looking at us, you know. We had a space around us you wouldn't believe on the freeway. Incidentally, he had a pretty good blood pressure.
I have an answer to that about practical jokes. I think it's always the severity of the practical joke. You know, if you go to an extreme, it gets kind of crazy, like the nurses that you talked about, the nurses for laughter. Yes. I've had those nurses, and they short-sheeted my bed.
But didn't you feel better afterwards?
Well, I did. I laughed. And
practical jokes are something, too, that's funnier after the fact. At the time, sometimes it's shocking, and then that's something you would always remember.
How do you encourage laughter? Let me ask you, Joel, because if you're working with an audience that's difficult, as most of us in life work with an audience that is difficult.
How do I encourage laughter? The first thing I do is I whip out the balloon animals, and everybody loves me to do balloon animals, and everybody has fun.
That's first and foremost. What about you, Scott?
Well, I try to find out about them, and then you feel the audience out. We have the advantage of being able to ask them for a suggestion. We ask for an object, and if they give you something sexual, well, we know where we got to go with the humor. But you feel the audience out. and you feel the person. And
Now, wait a minute.
if they slap you, then you know you've gone too far.
I see. Okay, I'm going to put that to the psychological side here. Not particularly, not Scott's comment, but the idea of encouraging humor. The woman called and said, I grew up in a family that was humorous. My husband didn't necessarily. And if we accept, as I think we do, that laughter and humor is good for us, how do we encourage it?
Well, again, I think the first way is to make jokes about yourself and laugh at yourself, because that's going to be easier for people around you to join in and do that. And then the next step will be, again, in areas that aren't real loaded and people aren't real attached to. It does take some actual attention to having fun. A lot of times, with families or couples I'm working with, I'll give them the assignment to have fun. That's much harder than when I give them the assignment of, you're not ready to feel good yet, I want you to be real depressed this week. That's easier. Okay.
Why is it easy? I don't understand that. You would think it would be the easiest thing in the world to have fun.
You would think so, but it's like, for some reason, we all seem to be real rough on ourselves, real critical of ourselves, and tend to look at whatever is out in our life, and we forget about all the good stuff and the enjoyable stuff that happens every day.
I think it has to do with the fact that you're raised, and the emphasis is always put on what you need to do, your responsibilities and everything, and nobody ever goes up to a kid and says, you go out there and have a good time.
I've seen people do that at Disneyland, though. We came here and you're having a good time.
We're paying a lot of money for this fun.
Let me ask Scott, because you see a lot of comedians that come through your place. What makes you laugh? What is the key that makes you feel good?
He's easy, too.
I don't know if you want to answer that, because to be real honest about it, when you are surrounded by comedy, and especially in all the different proportions that we see at Laughs Unlimited, because we try to appeal to all the different types of people, obviously. We get all different age groups, all different, we get people from all over this state, and we try to bring in a variety. Joel is prop comedy, is a little bizarre and esoteric, and there's other people that are straight, there's political comedy. We see all of it. When you deal with that on a day-to-day basis, what makes me laugh becomes the extremely absurd. I mean, to really laugh, it's stuff that you can't say on TV.
The worst audience is an audience of comics, because they go, that's funny.
Let me write that. You are at the Delta Queen restaurant on Saturday nights, correct, with RSVP. You are going to be at Laughs Unlimited through Sunday. Through Sunday.
I'll be there for a long time.
And he'll be there forever and ever. Okay? Very good.
We thank you all for putting a smile on our faces this morning.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. That was Look Who's Talking, a TV magazine show from back in the early 80s, where Dr. David Rudd, Joel Hodgson, and myself, along with improv artist Scott Coleman, talk about stand-up comedy and all the positive physical and mental advantages it is to laughing and to listening to stand-up comedy. It was hosted by Jim Finnerty and Sue Pearson. We want to thank them for doing this, and we hope you enjoyed the information and the comedy shared in this short show. Thanks for listening. Be sure to continue to write me at scottscomedystuff@gmail.com and let me know what you like, don't like, and anybody you'd like to hear from. And we'll see you next week for another great show on Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. Thanks for listening. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.